proven correct. I now lead an organization that has more than 650,000 supporters, and we did not even exist 8 months ago. So it is without a trace of arrogance, but just factually, that I say you should heed what I'm about to say. When people ask me if this pandemic was planned from the very beginning, my personal answer is no. I think the virus escaped the lab accidentally. At first, I think most people were stunned into non-action. They didn't know what to do. Profit-minded entities recovered their senses first, and dressing it up nicely advocated for their interests, whether that was lab testing or vaccine production, scientific grants, etc. But much more malevolent forces soon pushed their own ideas. The first shift I felt in society was around April 2020. The emotional overlay in our country became much darker. In trying to articulate exactly what I felt, what I can say is there was more than sufficient evidence by then, in April, to have done things differently. While schools should never have been closed, by April there was abundant evidence that that was an incorrect initial decision. By then, April, early treatment was clearly effective. At the same time as what was actually very good news, we were extending the lockdowns, murdering the middle class, castrating the churches, and starting to implement #social compliance mandates with the mask. Over the next months, as the science got better and better, and the scientific graphs showed the same curvatures as previous viral epidemics, which wax and wane, and likely evidence more recently that we have long since reached herd immunity, the news and the tyranny kept getting more and more hysterical. For me as a physician on the front lines, and as an attorney, the mismatch was so enormous that I overturned my entire life to speak to this. And I speak on the mismatch between reality and what we're being told is real. Now, 1 year later, middle-class businesses are decimated, and almost all churches have kneeled to the government. If you were in charge of engineering this evil, it would be time to take a victory lap. You would not actually have to take any further action in this direction because you've won. You bankrupted the middle class and you've eliminated serious opposition. What do you do when you've won? Well, if you've read The Art of War or Saul Alinsky, the answer is obvious. You solidify your winnings. Around January 2021 is when I felt my second societal shift. There is now a religious fervor to the vaccination. The majority of the people getting vaccinated now believe they are righteous in making this decision, and that by definition, those who don't are subhuman and properly outcasted. It is the obligations of everyone in this room who is hearing my voice to observe the truth of what I'm saying. Last year, we doctors spoke out, and for many years prior to that, people who you've heard from tonight spoke out long before me. We speak out because we cannot be silenced in the face of what we know to be true evil. Although our numbers are small, because righteous indignation fuels us, we persevere, and we would have eventually won. But now, for the first time, the other side, instead of feeling indifferent, is going to be able to tap into the same type of righteousness to motivate their side. And while the average person might be split yes or no on the vaccine, amongst leadership that controls every facet of our world, banking, telecommunications, media, education, and government, they are all on the other side. Let me say this again. What has fueled you and me is the righteous indignation that evil is being perpetrated. That power is now being harnessed to fuel the other side. They have had all the advantages except this one. Once they clinch this critical advantage, legally, we're finished. This is very obvious to me. It is an emotional feeling I am observing in others. It is a change in Americans. Never again is literally happening here on American soil. What's going on right now is utterly indistinguishable from mid-1930s Nazism, and I say that as a daughter of a child of the Holocaust. In my entire life, I've never compared anything to the Holocaust, but I want to share with you what I think and how I'm experiencing it. I used to believe that most Germans were secretly anti-Semitic. Just what I felt as a Jew. They murdered so many of us, why wouldn't I think that? After this past year, I don't think so anymore. I think most were neutral or even thought positively of Jews. After all, German intermarriage and assimilation rates were very high. Jewish Germans were the top of their academic and professional classes. And this year, I've seen brother turn against brother. We are watching as people are indoctrinated into the big lie that their getting inoculated is an act of self-sacrifice for the greater good. That person in turn then feels righteously entitled to dehumanize the others. They feel, I did this for you, and if you're not going to do this for me, you are a subhuman person and it's perfectly okay to mistreat you. This belief system is socialism, it's communism, it's fascism, it's Nazism. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's the opposite of what we believe. It's very obvious to me that this is exactly what's happening. I started feeling this way approximately January. There is now a religious fervor. There's a civil rights stampede toward accepting that even one's bodily integrity is not one's own. This total compliance with government edicts for a product shielded not just from liability, but shielded even from dispassionate, unbiased scientists examining the product, portends subjugation of all humanity. Persons will eventually fall into two classes: those who comply and those who are oppressed. The untouchables, which will be us, may be smarter, healthier, and hardier, but we will be a small minority who won't be able to communicate, travel, or do banking. I know I stand in a room with people who've been fighting this fight much longer than me. And many persons who are speaking believe the fight is about health. With every ounce of my being, I'm here to tell you that is not the fight we are in. We have a perfect storm of dehumanizing the other. This will inevitably result in apartheid. I use this word also very deliberately. Africans will remain free of this apartheid only until they become financially useful to the moneyed class. The potential for scientific catastrophe is so clear that it reveals the civil liberties fight very clearly. The fight some of you believe you are in, vaccinations and death, fairness, money, is nothing compared to the real fight we're in. I compare the size of the fight to when I first heard Bobby say it is so large when you consider how much money Big Pharma makes on vaccines. But that's nothing compared to what they make selling you all the other stuff you need from taking a vaccine. Right? I remember when I first heard that, it was like a woo moment. It's a paradigm shift in understanding the size and scope of the issue. That is what I'm presenting to you now. You must first come to my way of thinking that mandatory vaccination is the civil rights issue of the day. This is Brown versus Board of Education. This is Jim Crow. This is the Civil Rights Act of the 1960s. This is not vaccine versus no vaccine. It's not even about forced medical treatment. This fact pattern is nothing like the Supreme Court case of Jacobson from 100 years ago. This is the Jewish nation saying you cannot go into a synagogue if you don't take an experimental, investigational, use-only agent 2 generations after the Nuremberg Code outlawed such a thing worldwide for a trivial virus that has treatment and virtually only kills the frail with an average age of death that exceeds the life expectancy. Coming soon to us all. There is a freight train bearing down on all of humanity. We will never win after the EUA is lifted, which is likely within 2 to 4 months of today at most. That's another thing. I thought we were going to have until the end of the trials, which is October 22 and January 23 for Pfizer. But I've been advised by people smarter than me, that's not true. We probably only have until the summer. The public pressure will become, in other words, they'll say that it's off the emergency use, that the trials will continue, but the results of the trial will not be necessary in order to give it full approval. The legal battle is much easier while it's in an experimental phase under an EUA. Once the EU is lifted, the public pressure will become a stampede, and the world will take an irreversible step toward becoming split into these two societies, those who comply and those who are oppressed. As I've said, we will not simply become two opposing societies, those who comply and those who do not comply, because those who comply hold all the levers of banking, telecommunications, media, government, and education. So we will become those, I'm sorry, I said that, comply or oppress. May I remind you that everything is at stake, even life itself. Consider that Bill Gates is now the biggest farmland owner in the United States of America. I can't tell you why he owns that farmland, but it's a fact. I am sorry to bring such depressing news. I speak on this because I must. Everyone must join this fight. I'm putting together the smartest people I know to craft our legal strategy. We must find a court and a judge that will hold the line on people's bodily integrity. If we lose this one, there is no other fight to be had. This is it. Once people line up for an experimental vaccine, and once the government forces this, there is nothing else remaining. Of course, there'll be digital passports. Of course, there might be more vicious vaccines. Of course, of course, of course. If you know someone who is strategically brilliant, who should be included in the brain trust I'm forming, if you know someone who is wealthy, who must donate to this cause, if you know someone who is passionate about fighting and volunteering and helping us in America's Frontline Doctors, please write to us. On America's Frontline Doctors, we are shifting to become really essentially a civil rights organization. Our tagline is we're the trusted name for independent information, and we will bring you independent, unbiased information on science, on law. We've started a news division. There's an exclusive interview, for example, we just did a couple of days ago with Dr. Michael Yeadon, for those of you who know him. So we're bringing hard news. We've also set up a legal resources section. You can email legal@afls.org. But there's a ton of resources. For example, if you're a person who's written to us or thought about writing to us, you want to bring a mask case. You're trying to go into your store and they tell you need a mask, but you actually have a disability. And you're not allowed to wear a mask, right? Because your disability might be that you need to breathe, just saying. Or not to be subjugated, I suppose that's a disability too. But we're putting together people, plaintiffs, and attorneys. So our legal section is just huge. And as you probably know, we have a telemedicine section as well to help people actually solve their medical problems, get medicines that they need. So thank you. I do it for you. I do it for you. In return, you have to speak out. You have to not be silent. You have to send this. If you know someone brilliant who you have contact with, people listening in the green room, if you have someone brilliant, send them to this legal trust, because within 3 or 4 weeks, we have to formulate a legal strategy to push back. And again, big donors, we need them as well. And beyond that, I just want to say I'm honored to be here. Thank you for inviting me.